Namaste to all the participants. Today we will be talking about pre-Gupta temples, or generally I call the topic as Antiquity of Indian Temples. So I have been working on temples. It's quite time now. So while the presentation is going on, I will also discuss about a few aspects that are there widely in circulation, which are not generally validated. But then the topic of antiquity of Hindu temple. Now, before getting into the discussion, I would like to point out two few important points. One is every one of us, okay, through archaeological evidences, epigraphical evidences, though we do not have much epigraphical evidences, literary evidences, it is very clear that temple was not an institution during Vedic era. But then what was, this is the point I'm referring to. It was not an institution during Vedic times. But then what was important during Vedic times was the Vedi, or the Yajna Kund, or the Yajna Vedi. Vedi itself is the word that is commonly used, which is not used by us, but then the word Vedi was common during them. So Vedi was important during Vedic era, right? So that is how. So what used to happen in Vedi? In Vedi, they used to worship fire. They used to worship fire in the sense Agni, and that is how Rigveda, the first sloka, or the first word of Rigveda in the sense the ancient book in the world, starts with Agnimile Purohitam. In the sense, it explains about Agni, and so that is there. That is what is placed in the Vedi. And Shatapatha Brahmana. Okay, I would like to pronounce it again. Shatapatha Brahmana clearly mentions that the sun in the sky is none other than the fire on the earth. In the sense, when we are performing yajna, and when we are lighting the fire in the Vedi, it means that we are worshipping the sun. So Vedi was common during the Vedic era. Now, there is also a misconception among the historians, and especially us, okay, the family, the fraternity, archaeologists and historians, and especially the art historians, that a temple construction techniques, or a temple as an institution, proliferated during the 10th century and not before that, in a sense. Now, when there is such question, immediately the next question arises: what about the Guptas? Because you see a lot of temple construction activity during the era of Guptas. That is another important aspect. But immediately they say, yes, okay, Guptas we can accept. So you can include Guptas to the temple construction thing. But then during Guptas, temples were not as institutions, but temples were just constructed. They were in their evolution. Please pay attention to all the words that I am using here. During the Guptas, temple construction was there, no doubt. But then the question is, they said temple proliferation happened only during 10th century. Immediately when you say that temple construction happened during the Guptas also, they say yes, there was, but it was not an institution, isn't it? They only say that it was just evolution of temple construction. So whatever the points I am mentioning here, I will try to answer, provide you an explanation during the session. And then, what did temples look like in pre-Gupta era? This is the crux of our discussion. How did they look like? What were they? Did they really look like the present day temples, which are humongous, majestic, huge, flying into the sky, like maybe Tanjore Brihadishwara temple or Khajuraho Kandarya Mahadev temple? That we will look into now. So basically, what I would like to say, whenever there is a discussion of the temples, it starts with Gupta era, or during the time, let us say somewhere around 4th century CE. And then we quietly, because when we talk about the temples during Gupta era, we quietly try to avoid or evade 500 years of history of temples and their evolution before Guptas. 500 is okay, half millennium, isn't it? And okay, trying to discard or avoid half millennium of history that is related to temples is such an unjust to what we will be doing to our study. That is one thing I would like to highlight here. And then it is a Western concept that every one of us have to agree. What is that Western concept? Western concept is this: everything rises from the pre-existing thing. It's like a concept of evolution. See, there is nothing that happens on its abruptly on this earth. There should be something prior to it, and that is the reason there comes a concept. So from there only evolves another concept, which says that temples evolved from Buddhist stupa. This is one discussion that happens, and who does that? Who brings such a discussion? Especially, I have forgotten to mention the name here or the term here: colonial art historians. And, and colonial art historians, what do? They say that the temple, because maybe there is similarity between the structure of temple and a stupa, they say there is no similarity. That is first thing. But similarly, okay, roughly, you can say a stupa looks like this and a temple shikara looks like this. So they find some similarity, and because they find some similarity between stupa and the shikara of the temple, they say yes, okay, maybe there is one aspect called as votive stupa. Votive stupa is also called as Mannat stupa, which is the what do you say, mobile form of stupa, which is used by the monks, the bhikshus, in their viharas or chaityagrahas, which is much famous in Southeast Asian part of the okay, country, okay, the world. Now, next, so that point must be very clear. They say that temples evolved from Buddhist stupa, and especially who? The colonial art historians. And I need not mention, because when I talk about colonial art historians, all art historians like Percy Brown, James Ferguson, so all these people, they are quite famous, evident. And whenever we are asked to study a book about Indian architecture, especially the temple, Buddhist heritage, etc., these are the two people we mentioned too. And they have written their books quite long back. Okay, they have published their work quite long back, and that time enough archaeological evidences were not available to say or mention a point the way I am doing it today. So I am more on an advantage or on a benefit side compared to James Ferguson and Percy Brown. In the sense, now enough evidences are available, and anyways, I will never doubt their scholarliness and their hard work. The only one thing is their concept of how the temples have evolved from Buddhist stupa is actually to be questioned or to be challenged. Now, immediately after that, so they also talk about evolutionary stages of temples. So whenever they are talking about evolutionary stages of temples, they refer to Gupta era. And in this Gupta era, whenever they are talking about evolutionary temples, there is one temple called as Parvati Temple in Nachnakutara. That is one thing. And there is also another temple from Devgad. Devgad is near Lalitpur, Uttar Pradesh, which is called as Dashavatara Temple. So Parvati Temple, Nachnakutara, and Devgad Dashavatara Temple are considered to be in the line of evolution. They say Parvati Temple, Nachnakutara, do not have a shikara, but whereas Devgad Dashavatara Temple has a shikara, it means they say earlier the temples were devoid of the shikara. They were flat roofed, okay, structures. But later on, okay, when is this happening? All this is happening during the time of Guptas only. So they say during the time of Guptas, okay, the Dashavatara temple or Devgad temple has got a shikara. So they say the flat roof temples have evolved to, okay, the towered temples, the shikara temples. Now, I would like to, okay, definitely that must have happened. There is no, okay, challenge or contesting in it. But one thing I would like to say is this is happening somewhere in 5th century CE. I repeat, when is this happening? This is happening in 5th century CE. So please remember these few points I have mentioned here. So while we go ahead in the lecture, I would like to show you some evidences, facts and figures wherein such facts can be looked into. Now, one of the ancient earliest evidences that we have is the seven fire altars from the Kalibanga, one of the Sindhu Saraswati civilization site or Indus Valley site. So the references I would like to mention, okay, we have Shatapatha Brahmana. Okay, Shatapatha Brahmana is one of the texts that discusses detailedly about the construction types, techniques of Vedi or Yajna. I have a copy of Shatapatha Brahmana. Okay, though the language is quite difficult for us to understand, but still, then to understand the few concepts related to Vedi. Okay, it's a very good book, and the same Shatapatha Brahmana is mentioned by T. A. Gopinath Rao in his book Hindu Iconography. There are two volumes of Hindu iconography. You people can refer to that book. Okay, one of the beautiful book. And what is the argument of T. A. Gopinath Rao? He says the Vedic altars are the precursors of temples. I repeat, the Vedic altars are the precursors of temples. Recently, uh, uh, Nagaswamiji, R. Nagaswamiji from Tamil Nadu, who was once upon a time the director of ASI, Tamil Nadu region, he worked all his life dedicated to prove that how the Vedi or Yajnakunds are the precursors of temples, and the temples have evolved from the Vedi. This is what he has tried all his life proving, and recently, okay, he has attained the moksha. But anyways, okay, now so the seven fire altars of Kalibanga are mentioned by Brajvasi Lal in his book, okay, Vedic altars. Sorry, the book The Rigvedic People, Invaders, Immigrants or Indigenous, wherein he talks about seven fire altars as maybe representing the Sapta Sindhu, the seven rivers, or else maybe representing the seven mother goddesses that are mentioned in one of the Indus Valley scenes. But anyways, we do not know what they are too. But then, what is important to pay attention to is the fire altars that are found in Indus Valley civilization, and we continue. So later Indus Valley civilization site we have Banavali. But what do we find here is the same fire altar or Vedi is found, but the shape is apsidal. What is the shape? The same shape is apsidal, and archaeologically it is evaluated uh, and proved that it's not just the altar or the Vedi is apsidal, but then they have a separate temple mound here, a temple a plan here, wherein there was a separate cell. Okay, you can see the plan here. Okay, the bricks are arranged. It was a brick construction, and there is this apsidal altar, and rituals were performed here. So they say this must be the earliest temple in the sense earliest cella or cubicle for the fire altar. But what is that important that we have to mention here is the Vedi that started with a square shape now slowly is turning into apsidal plan like this, right? And then the reference, the discussions of this uh, apsidal, Vedis, okay, are enough discussed in the book The Lost River, Saraswati by Michel Danino. So, okay, he has written a very good things about this apsidal fire altars. So now, going ahead, we have found Vedic altars in Kalibanga, right? We have also found apsidal Vedic altars or fire altars in Banavali. And when it comes to Atranji Kera, this is a place in Uttar Pradesh. And also you find okay, this kind of altars in Malhar, which is also archaeological site in Chhattisgarh. So, what is similarity between Kalibanga to Banavali, Banavali to Atranjikeda, and Atranjikeda to Malhar? They all. So, Sindhu Saraswati civilization, later Sindhu Saraswati civilization, Atranjikeda somewhere around Mauryan era and post Mauryan era. In the sense, imagine around, let us say, 3000 to 4000 years of history. One thing that never changed is the fire altars or the Vedis. In almost all these archaeological sites, we have found the fire altars. Fire altars have been important. And the same apsidal fire altars that were found in Bonavali in the same line, we could find a temple which is dedicated to God Naga. This is called as the Naga Temple. And where is this Naga Temple? This Naga Temple is from Mathura. So you can see a beautiful apsidal plan of the temple here, very beautiful, which almost looks like the chaitya grihas, the present chaitya grihas that you look in maybe Ajanta and Ellora caves. Almost all the caves, Buddhist caves that you find in Maharashtra region, they have same apsidal plan. And why the temple number 18, the temple number 18, which is apsidal plan from Sanchi group of monuments, also is in apsidal plan like this, which is still well preserved than the Naga temple that is there in Mathura. I repeat here, or I write here, Mathura. Now, what is that? Continuity. Continuity what? Continuity. So, first point I would like to establish is the Vedic altars have been in continuation right from Kalibanga to Banavali to Atranjikera to Malhar to Mathura, Naga temple, and then the structure square, sometimes apsidal, square and apsidal. If it was apsidal, definitely there are some okay temples still an apsidal plan, that is very clear. We have a Naga temple in Mathura, and then we also have okay temple number 18 in Sanchi group of monuments, right? Now, going further, so I assume that you people are clear by now, okay, the Vedic altar and its importance. Now, coming to Kautilya's Arthashastra. Okay, why am I referring to Kautilya's Arthashastra? Because, okay, I have given the source here. You can refer to the source here. Now, he uses a word called as Agnisthanam. The word I repeat again, Agnisthanam. And he says the space of or the arrangement of Agnisthanam will be 4 by 3 yards. And he says, what is this place? This place is dedicated to fire, or this is the place where fire is worshipped. And he says, now, see, in Vedic times, okay, it was individual worship. In the sense, an individual person used to sit near the Vedi, and always remember the Vedi is directed towards the east direction. I said you, Shatapadamaramana clearly mentions that the Agni in the Vedi is none other than sun, who is in the sky, and it is facing east, or it is positioned in such a way that the person who is sitting, who is performing the Vedi, will be facing the east in the sense the direction of sunrise. And in those days, it was a worship, individual worship, who each and every individual used to have, especially in Indus Valley civilization or Vedic Saraswati, Sindhu Saraswati civilization, such is how they used to be. But later on, slowly, this individual worship becomes community worship. I repeat, community worship. And that is the reason, see, the same individual worship continues even today in our homes. What is that? That individual worship in our homes, whatever, whichever, whomever you may worship, that individual worship in our homes is called as Griharcha, which is still there and is almost mandatory in every Hindu household. Definitely, not even every Hindu household, even the schisms that are there in Hinduism, all such people, they definitely follow Griharcha. But anyways, what is that point that I would like to highlight here from the Kautilya's Arthashastra is Agnisthanam, means the place where 4 by 3 yards place is constructed for the fire. Fire is worshipped. And here, for the first time, Chanakya is setting a rule and saying that except the places of private worship or individual worship, the Agnisthanam should be allowed or permitted to be visited for everyone in the society. It should not be a private place or private affair. In the sense, now the concept of, in the sense, now let me tell you, Ardhashastra is not just something that is created only by the Kautilya. Kautilya has observed the society that was already or the things in the society that were already in practice. So he must have looked at the things that were in the society in practice, that community worship is happening. The place called as Agnisthanam, wherein there is fire placed and people are worshipping, and it is no more private or individual worship. People are coming in groups, and it is strictly, they have to be allowed. There is no second thought about it. I repeat, the word used by him is Agnisthanam, right? How does it sound like? It sound like something, a word called Devasthanam, right? Now, Next comes another important concept which is called as Chaitya Vriksha or Kalpadruma. Okay, there is this uh, episode called as Kshirar Nava. What is that episode? Kshirar Nava, or basically it is also called as Kshira Sagara Madhan. In a sense, the churning of the ocean. So this event, the churning of the ocean, okay, is mentioned or amply explained in Vishnu Puranam. And in this Vishnu Puranam, what happens is, okay, there arises a tree called as Kalpadruma, or it is also called as Kalpa Vriksha, the tree of the world. But anyways, earlier the worship of Chaitya Vriksha, irrespective of Buddhism, irrespective of Jainism, or irrespective of Hinduism, all this, the darshanas, it was definitely interesting. This panel that you see is from the Sanchi Stupa, wherein the Chaitya Vriksha is worshipped, right? And then when I'm talking about Vishnu Puranam is dated to 700 to 300 BCE by Ramachandra Dikshitar, and also you can look at other sources I have mentioned. But anyways, what point I would like to make is Chaitya Vriksha was a pre-Buddhist concept, which was much in practice, which was also followed by the Jains, which was also followed by the Hindus, and it was widely spread. And then the concept of slowly the concept of Vriksha from the Chaitya Vriksha uh, declines, and only the Chaitya becomes highlighted. Now Chaitya comes into discussion much. Now this word Chaitya becomes important word in Buddhist worship. And now, so from this only the word stupa comes, or the word Chaitya or the word stupa emerges. Now, through Chaitya Vriksha, the word Chaitya comes, and then the stupa, the word stupa emerges, etc. And stupa itself is not actually a Buddhist monument. Why? Because we have enough archaeological evidences that the stupa was also a Jain monument. How? Okay, we have a very beautiful book written by Vincent S. Smith, published in 1901, wherein he talks about the Jain stupa. So one aspect that I would like to highlight here is saying that the temples have evolved from Buddhist stupa, right? No more stands validate or no more stands right. Why? Because there are also Jain stupas, and we have enough evidences of Jain stupas from Mathura. And one of the earliest published work is the work of the Vincent A. Smith, right? In the sense, the stupas were pre-existing structures. So the people who believed that, in the sense, they wanted to create a narrative here. What is that narrative? Narrative is the Buddhist structures are the precursors of Hindu structures which do not stand true. That is one thing I would like to say, which is also amply can be demonstrated through different evidences, of which one I have mentioned here. Clear? Now why? Because the same concept, the Western concept of everything comes from the pre-existing. Now where did the Buddhist stupa evolve from? So when they say the Hindu temples have evolved from the Buddhist stupa, then where did the Buddhist stupa has evolved from? Isn't it? Already there were concept of stupas practiced by everybody in the society before the Buddhist stupas also, which were later on became much famous during the time of Ashoka. Now what I would like to mention from all these 3-4 slide discussions is, now the Vedi that was there from Kalibanga to Banavali to Atranjikeda to Malhar in a different eras of time, different eras in the history in the past, right? I said they are this. And then later the Chaitya Vriksha, which was much venerated in the society, both of them put together. Okay, this became the base of the temple. That is what I want to say. The Yagyavedi or the Vedi became the base of the temple. How? Because there is this great text called as Brihat Samhita. In Brihat Samhita, chapter 56 talks about the description of temples. In the description of temples, Brihat Samhita clearly says the best plan for a square, okay, for a temple is a square. The best square is considered as the best. And what is the plan? The plan is called as Vastu Purusha or Vastu Purusha Mandala. And which model is considered the best? The square model. And where does the square model or square base of the temple rise from? It rises from the Vedi. And that is the reason the number 64, isn't it? 8 into 8, 64 stands lot of importance even in the Vedi also, and even in the Vastu Purusha Mandala, wherein all the boxes are divided 8 into 8 and you form 64, and all these 64 boxes are dedicated to the gods, and the center one is called as Brahmasthana. But anyways, the important crux of this is, so the base of the temple rises from the Vedi, and then the tower or the Shikara has got its inspiration from the Chaitya Vriksha. So the combination of Vedi and Chaitya Vriksha altogether have given rise to the temple in its fullest. Going ahead, now, Antiquity of the temples. Let us talk about the pre-Gupta era temples. The pre-Gupta era temples, we have the Madhya Pradesh. In Madhya Pradesh, we have a place called as Bhagor. Okay, in 1980, 1980 and 1982, and then even in the 1984 also. In 2-3 phases, archaeological excavations have happened in this place called Bhagor. And then, G.R. Sharma has done a very good research about it, and they have found, a tree, and under that tree there was this structure, triangle shaped stone like this. So maybe something like a yantra, and people were worshipping it, and they could find traces of vermilion and many other things here. And they have considered, the earliest, or else almost the tribal form of worship dating to 9000 BCE to 8000 BCE. And it dates back to when? It dates back to the times of Kalibanga and Banavali. And what is happening? The stone under the, see, what is this again? The concept of Chaitya Vriksha, isn't it? The worship of the revered, the holy trees, or the trees means holy. So their worship. And a very good paper is written by Canoyer and the Clark, Desmond Clark. JD means the Desmond Clark and G.R. Sharma. So Desmond Clark was Canoyer, and Canoyer was the supervisor. Under his instructions, G.R. Sharma was carrying on the research. Right. So now I would like to say it dates back to 9000. This is at least 10,000 years old, not less than that. From present, before present, 10,000 years before present. We have this Bogor stone. It is one of the earliest temple evidences. Going further, Bisnagar Vishnu Temple. So we know Bisnagar Vishnu Temple is Vidisha, near Vidisha, and this is also famous today as Heliodorus Pillar. Heliodorus Pillar today is also famous with the name Kamba Baba. So this Kamba Baba, and again excavations were done here. And see, for all the references I have mentioned, all the evidences or whatever I'm providing here, references are mentioned here. You can take a note of them. Otherwise, I'll share them later on. Now, Bhasnagar Vishnu Temple, a lot of, because here you can see in this corner of the photo, if you go today, you will find this a pillar, Vidisha pillar or Heliodorus pillar, which was erected by Heliodorus somewhere around the 2nd century BCE, in the sense 2200 years before present. And here you can see clearly the oval shaped temple was constructed, and before this temple there was a 8-pillared mandapa, and then before that there was the Garuda Dvaja. Obviously the Heliodorus pillar is nothing but Garuda Dvaja or Garuda pillar. Garuda is the Vahana of Vishnu, and obviously before the Vishnu temple it has to be there. So earlier, so 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century BCE, the worship of Vasudeva was always in practice. So this is one of the earliest temples. Now you don't no more see it like this, because they have excavated everything, they have removed and they have covered it again. So you only find the Heliodorus pillar there today. So Besnagar Vishnu Temple, 2200 years before present. And then there is this Moravel inscription, few kilometers from Mathura. So there is this inscription in one of the walls, okay, brick walls of the temple. They found this inscription wherein it is written Deva Shilagraha. And there was also another word that was used in this inscription, which is called as Pratima. So the earliest Brahmi written. And then what is this Deva Shilagraha? Deva, God, Shilagraha means the stone structure of stone house for the god. That is what is mentioned in this inscription. So now Professor Luders, he has written a beautiful article on this, and the same is also published in volume 24, Epigraphia Indica. You can refer to, and see, I have mentioned the sources here. You can check it later on. Yes, Devashila Graha. Okay, there was this king called as Sodasha. So during his reign, this was erected, and he clearly says it was erected or it was built for the Vrishni gods. And who is Vrishni gods? Vrishni are the Vishnu class of gods. Okay, Vasudeva, Balarama, okay, etc. Indra, Dyumna, all these people. So Vrishni, a class of gods, Vishnu, and the word that he has used in this inscription is very important. Again, it is dated to somewhere around the 2nd century BCE to at least 1st century CE. So even if we consider 1st century CE, okay, in a sense, right 2000 years before present, or at least 300 years before Guptas, right? And what is the word that is used? Devashila Griha in the Moravell inscription, right? Another inscription we have some 20 kilometers from 12 to 20 kilometers from Chittorgarh, UNESCO World Heritage Site, that is Nagari inscription, or Hathigumfa inscription also. But in Nagari, there is this compound wall, okay, which is called as Hathibada. So Akbar has used this as elephant stable. That is the reason they call it as Hathi Bada. But then see, a room is constructed here. Why? Because in this wall there is an inscription towards the left and towards the right in this room, and that is the reason they wanted to preserve the inscription, and they have constructed. The ASI has constructed the wall over that boundary wall. And what is this boundary wall that you see with the white stone? So this is there is a person whose name is Gajayana, Gajayana Sarvatata. And what did this Gajayana Sarvatata do? He has erected a Puja Shila Prakara. In a sense, something that is venerated, a puja, which can be, to whom puja can be performed. For that, he has erected a Shila Prakara, in the sense, compound. In a sense, this is something like Prakara. See, the word, same word is used even today for the temple compound, which is called as Prakaram in South India, Dravidian temples, and Prakara, okay, Prakar in the North Indian temples. So Gajayana Sarvatata, maybe he was identified as one of the rulers of the Kanva dynasty, which is still there. If you travel to Chittorgarh, you can visit, okay, the Nagari place. And again, it is dated to 2nd century BCE, in the sense 2200 years old or before present. Okay. Now again, from the Epigraphia Indica volume 20, you can refer to a beautiful, okay, description. Now coming to numismatic, those are the evidences, few evidences I have tried to quote from the archaeological evidences, right? Nagari, then okay, kind of Hathibada inscription, etc., Bidisha, and all those, so Bagor stone, etc. So I'm talking not even somewhere around 50-60 years before the Guptas, right away 300, 400 years, 500 years before Guptas, there are these structures. And here is one important numismatic evidences, the coins of Audumbaras. And again, Audumbaras belong to 2nd century BCE. And whatever these people have ruled the Punjab region, okay, and they were the devotees of Shiva. And that is the reason they used to have their names as Shiva Dasa. Kind of, in the sense, always they used to have the epithets of Shiva, the synonyms of Shiva, and they used to use the word Dasa in their name. So in their coins, this is the one of the coin. And what is that important fact I would like to mention here is, you can see the temple, you can see the temple pillars here, and there is some wavy motion on the coin here, and what is this wavy motion? Wavy motion is the water. Maybe it may be the flowing river. And why? Because the temples are known as Tirtha Kshetras, in the sense the Kshetras that are there on the banks of the water body. And that is one important. Again, Brihan Samhita says very clearly that the first shloka starts, okay, not first shloka, at least within 10 shlokas, it says the gods always loved to be there on the banks of the water bodies. And that is the reason we have temple tanks also. Okay, temple tanks, temple ponds, kalyanis, okay, pushkar. So all such kinds of words we use for temple tanks. Now tirtha, maybe this is the tirtha because it is there on the banks of the water body. And here you can see, okay, a big trishul, okay, the ayudha of Shiva is okay, drawn here. Maybe the other kind of some flag or something like that. But then what is important here, over this temple you can see the two layered, in the sense two storied shikara. This is what is very important, the two-storied shikara over the Shiva temple. Now, when is this? This is, I'm talking about 2nd century BCE, in the sense 2200 years before present, and at least 300 years. Okay, 300 is very less, I am saying. Okay, very less, I am saying 300. But then, even if it is 300 years before Guptas, now one important point I would like to mention here is, if the temple evolution happened, temple evolution, when do our art historians describe as the temple evolution? They say during the Guptas the temples have evolved. How? They say the Parvati temple in Nachnakutara is a shikarless temple, and then the Dashavatara temple that is there in Devgad is a temple that had shikara. Now you say me, when is this happening? This is happening in 5th century or 5th century CE, during the era of Guptas. This evolution is happening. If the evolution of temple and its okay, the shikara is happening in 5th century CE, what are these coins doing here? And what about the shikara that is there? Two-storied shikara that is there on the coins of Audumbras. In a sense, the shikara or the evolution of shikara on the temples do not belong to 5th century CE, to the time of Guptas, but it predates at least 500, 600 years before the Guptas. And this is one of the greatest evidence that we can talk to. And my source of reference is Alexander Cunningham's The Coins of Ancient India. One of the beautiful evidence. Now see, there is no question, again there is no question of thinking like the evolution, that the flat roofed temples were existing during the time of Guptas. Okay, like how? Like the temple number 17 from the complex of Sanchi Stupa, isn't it? It is a flat roof temple. But then okay, then what happened? Then they say during the Guptas only the temples have evolved. If during the Guptas the temples have evolved, then what about the coins of the Audumbras? And these, surprisingly, these coins of Audumbras are not in a regular uh, printed material, or they are not discussed about, not talked about. Maybe okay, they are not paid much attention to. And this is one important milestone in saying that temples and their shikaras have not evolved definitely during the time of Guptas. No doubt there were flat roof structures, but that doesn't mean that. And another important thing I would like to mention, if there was a shikara on the stone temples during the time of Guptas, okay, or during the 5th century CE, same time there were also temples built in brick. Built in brick, I repeat, they are temples built in brick. For example, if you go to Uttar Pradesh, okay, you find Bitargaon. Yes, I remember the place name, Bitargaon. If you look at the temple Bitargaon, no, I am very sure that the Bitargaon temple is the post Dashavatara temple of Devgad, or almost contemporary to Dashavatara temple of Devagad. But then one aspect you have to find, pay attention to, is how brick has been used, and intricate carving or construction of temple shikara happens in those bricks is not something that is evolutionary. Why? Because the work in the brick temple looks very advanced and matured. If it is in the evolution, then it should be very crude. And the same shikara that is constructed over the Dashavatara temple is also in its matured stage. It is not in its crude form. It means the flat roofed temples and the evolved shikara temples, they have coexisted during the time of Guptas, but they cannot be considered to the evolution to be the evolution of the temples. Why? Because we already have enough numismatic evidences, okay, from the Audumbara coins, that the temples were having the shikaras. So this is what I wanted to uh, say. And finally, I would like to, okay, come to this conclusion: the how evolution of Hindu temples have happened, isn't it? The sun happens to be Agni in the Vedi, and the earth is held by the 4 points, though it is circular, but then it is held at the 4 points. Okay, holding of the earth at 4 points give rise to a four pointed Vedi square plan, which is considered one of the sacred model or sacred plan or sacred structure, which becomes the base of the temple or the Vastu Purusha Mandala. And the same will be, okay, evolving into something called as Purusha. And the Purusha evolves to become the temple. And that is the reason Shilparatna. Shilparatna is not the text that is from the Kerala. Shilparatna Kosha is an Orisian text which clearly explains Anga Chaturdasham, in the sense the 14 body parts of us are clearly established or mentioned in the temple. And this is a small graphical representation what I have tried to create to show how evolution of temple happened. And definitely it is pre-Gupta evolution, and the Shikara is a pre-Gupta aspect. Why? Because we have enough proof of Audumbara coins, and the temple, Vishnu temple at Vidisha, Bhasnagar, and Puja Shila Prakara of at Nagari. And then okay, rest of the evidences I have been talking to, all this establish a fact that there existed good good number of pre-Gupta temples, and evolution definitely happened pre-Gupta, not during Gupta. So this is how very short and simple I wanted to keep the lecture. And I will stop it here so that
Thank
let
you so much, sir.
yeah.
Now the session is open for participants. Sir, could you explain a bit about the interlinking of Chaitya and temple architecture? A bit about Buddhist and Hindu temples, the connection between them.
Right. So the only connection that lies between the Hindu temple and the Chaitya is the Chaitya Vriksha. So the Vriksha was considered sacred, and that is the reason they used to worship. That is where. And then when you talk about Chaitya Graha, there are two aspects that comes into discussion. One is the stupa itself, the existence of stupa in Chaitya Graha, and then the concept of Chaitya Vriksha. When it comes to temple, the stupa do not become the aspect, only the Chaitya Vriksha remains. So this is how we can find a common link between the Chaitya and the temple. But then only one similarity that comes into discussion, or wherein we feel convinced when we look at, is the votive stupa that I said, or the miniature stupas that were carried to Far East Asian nations, maybe post Kushana period, or almost maybe during the time of Guptas. So that looks similar to Indian shikaras. So we have a misconception saying that the same votive stupa that is there is has become the temple shikara, wherein I strongly object to. And the special difference is now important is the stupa is a monument in the sense a kind of something related to a life event of Buddha or bhikshus or bhikkhuni. Sometime maybe his birth, maybe his death, maybe some remains of his body, physical body, are kept in the stupa and they are venerated and worshipped. But when it comes to a temple is constructed on a square platform, and there is a place that is given which is called as a place called as vortex. At that vortex you call it as Brahmasthana, and in Brahmasthana you do prana pratishtha. and after prana pratishtha you start worshipping, or you start bring that temple to life. In a sense, now the quite contrast, Buddhist stupa is a place where the dead or something related to that is there, but when it is in a temple, it all through is a living entity, and so that itself is considered a living entity and you worship it. So see, I do not say that is wrong and this is wrong. I do not say that is right and this is right. But then it is a contrast of ideas. That is only we have to pay attention to.
Sir, what is the significance of Chaitya Vriksha in Hindu religion? What is the significance? Like,
Yes,
why it has been always depicted like that in,
like
Hindu texts, Hindu
yes,
Brahman texts?
there are like three four important references that comes into discussion. One of the earliest references is from Vishnu, Mahabharata, obviously. So in Mahabharata, it is clearly says when there is thunderstorms, the kalpa vrikshas or the chaitya vrikshas. Okay, the word used itself is chaitya vriksha. The chaitya vrikshas are falling down. So it is our duty to protect the chaitya vrikshas. That is how it is mentioned in Mahabharata. And then the another next important discussion comes in Vishnu Puran. The same chaitya vriksha is considered as kalpadruma. And then the same kalpa vriksha, even today, okay, generally whenever a temple is built, and if a tree becomes the plan of the temple. So it is made sure that the temple, that tree itself is converted to Chaitya Vriksha and becomes the part of the temple, but it is never demolished. And that is how we have a beautiful ancient trees part of Indian temples, always. So, in the sense, okay, right from the tradition of, right from the period of Mahabharata, okay, these trees have been worshipped in different places of the village. Sometimes they say the Chaitya Vriksha used to be at the center of the village. Sometimes they say the Chaitya Vriksha used to be outside the temple towards the east. Sometimes they say away from the village. But anyway, and the same concept even follows today. Now, if you're constructing a Vishnu temple in Shanti Murti, you will be constructing him at the center of the village, like same Chaitya Vriksha. And if you are constructing some Ugra, say, let us say Narasimha Swami temple, you will construct it away from the village to avoid its consequences. So, and so the rules that were followed in worshipping the Chaitya Vriksha during the Mahabharata era, or the evidences that are mentioned in Mahabharata, the same rules with few alterations are followed in temple construction even today.
So, sir, basically, trees holds an important place in all the religions,
Yeah.
Buddhism, Jainism, and Hinduism as well.
Yes, and
And
tree
perhaps,
is the root of everything. That is where everything comes from.
yes, and perhaps the concept of sacred groves emerged from, those people worshipping trees. Maybe we
Yes,
can trace sacred groves' roots to it.
exactly. Especially the tribal concept, the sacred groves
Yes,
of tribals. Yes,
yes,
yes, definitely, no doubt.
yes,
Baigas, Kols, then Gons, Badagas, these people have a
yes,
concept of Sadar, wherein everybody will gather under a Chaitya Vriksha and they worship and they revere the trees.
yes. So, we should also develop some type of, feeling in, today's times, because we need to conserve those trees and cluster of trees. Trees are being cut down in today's time like mercilessly. So, so again, we
True.
should look up to ancient Indians. So, sir, it was quite an interesting lecture. It was very enlightening.